and we're back for episode 28 of Pursuing the Perfect Pint podcast. Feels like they're coming in thick and fast at the moment, Brent, so we'll have to decide what our next celebration point is. Probably 50, I guess.
Yeah, maybe but I think we just keep marching on, Danielle. I think we keep trying to make, incremental improvements. So we're learning our way, and we'll continue to do so.
So I think, Brent, every week we say you have a dual role of being, I don't know, weatherman and oil man. And so I think this morning we've had some news on the Iran-US war. Will it last? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a $1 billion question, I guess, Danielle. So we're here early the week of the 15th of June. It sounds like there's been a 60-day peace deal, although I think everyone would kind of be in the same place. I think we need to see it actually, be in place for a while and actually get a bit of calmness in the area, get the Strait of Hormuz open for an extended period of time, which will have a lot to do with, calming global markets. We have seen crude oil has dropped quite a bit. It's down in the area of $80 a barrel. Grain prices are sliding a little bit as well. So the risk premium that was built in is coming out, but it's back to the point: can we really count on this being a true end of this conflict, or temporary and it flares up again? So I guess I'm in the wait and see camp at the moment, Danielle.
Yeah, fair enough. And Brent, if you take off that oil hat and put on the weather hat?
Well, it's pretty good. And I guess when I said grain prices are weakening, softening, whichever, a lot of that's driven from not only the news in the Middle East, but also the weather. So and we're gonna have a visit here when I made a trip over to the UK, and you got a bit of a view there. The weather has improved, I would say, across all growing regions in the world for barley: Western Europe, Canada, Argentina, Australia. Moisture falling in all those areas, which is generally always good for crops. So I would say we're in an even better place than we were 1-2 weeks ago, and prices are continuing to drift lower. So that's a clear indicator that the weather is favorable. So my weather report today is things are looking good. Winter barley harvest is kicked off now in France, I would say, and spring not too far behind it, and that should look pretty good.
Brilliant. And I think, Brent, as you were visiting the UK last week, and I think you had an opportunity to have a very interesting catch up with Nick, and he's been a farmer there for a very long time. So between harvesting barley, he's also collecting fossils, you were telling us.
Yeah, so there's fossils in that part of the world, and also Roman artifacts. So it's a lot of history there, but and a bit of more recent history. And we said we've been to Nick's farm before, so it was really good that he welcomed us back. And he's got some interesting things that we can listen directly from him.
Brilliant. Let's hear what he has to say.
The Pursuing the Perfect Pint podcast has now found its way back. Actually, we've been here before with Nick Bumford from Guiting Manor Farms. We took a tour here 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Great. We've returned. So thanks, first of all, we must have behaved ourselves reasonably well that we got invited back. We've been out and we looked at some barley, which we'll talk briefly about, but we want to get on to a little bit more of the discussion around where barley fits in the whole program, in the rotation. But first of all, maybe you could do a bit of an intro to Guiting Manor and all that you do here, and what keeps you busy.
So we are at the village of Guiting Manor, which sits in the North Cotswold AONB, which is a part of the Protected Park and Landscapes for the UK. Farming represents an 85% land use within that protected park, so it's significant in terms of managing both the actual open land, the open space, but more importantly the landscape, which is cherished and visited for its beauty, and the wider environment and that of the ecosystem and the interactions that go on in and around farmland.
And as part of that, malting barley in particular, is part of the rotation, and you're quite supportive of what barley, the role it plays in your rotation. Maybe you could share what you talked as we planned for this, that you're kind of committed to barley because it does a lot for you.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just about to celebrate my 38th anniversary, but malting barley played a bigger part in the history of this arable farm. And when I came here, malting barley was in our rotation, and whilst we've changed the rotation a bit, we feed barley because we don't find there's a need to. The malting barley fits and works very well for us in with our other arable crops.
And what we saw is, for those listening, in terms of malting barley, we saw both winter and spring. So you're doing
We did.
a bit of both. Laureate on the spring side, which you're pretty pleased. You said, quite honestly, you haven't seen a good alternative. So it looks like Laureate, and you've got some seed already planned for next year. So Laureate's staying. You're trying a new winter variety. So there's a bit of exploration there.
Yes, so we've had many years of growing winter barley variety craft, and we've now switched to Buccaneer, which we're assured will produce similar or possibly better results in terms of output on yield, quality, and in terms of malt. I can't really comment on, but merchant has given me a buyback, which is the assurance that I need. So
Yeah.
I'm optimistic.
Yep. As you're not going to put seed in the ground if you think it's not saleable at some point later. So you need a good expectation that it's going to fit in the market. Otherwise, you would stick with pre-existing varieties.
I think even more so in these perilous times with what's going on globally, with all of the, if you like, the global dynamics and the consumption of either malt or beer, and having a buyback contract is a prerequisite requirement now, probably more so than it ever was, and that's sort of irrespective of variety. But we want varieties that will give us a robust performance and not a one-season wonder.
And we'll come back to that. I think the contracting piece is going to be increasingly more important going forward, because when we start adding other things like sustainability and regen ag and these things, I think those contracts will be probably even more critical and so on. But we'll come back around to that. I guess the crops look pretty good. We're here in late May. So I guess from what we saw on the drive around today, you're pretty pleased. Mother Nature will dictate what happens in the next 4 to 6 weeks. But as you sit here today, you feel, touch wood, feel pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, we started the year with a very wet January and February, extremely wet on the back of a wet December. And then we got into March and someone turned the tap off. So we've had a pretty dry spring, potentially drier than last year. But we've had odd showers. We've been careful to protect soil moisture that we started with, which was quite big from sort of February onwards. In fact, we had to wait for the fields to drain down before we could do any planting. And then we've gone into this continuous dry spell, but with the odd shower and occasionally a storm, which has kept us in play. And at this moment in time, the crops look pretty good. I've managed to keep the disease out, but we will need some rain next week.
I half joke. You look at the weather maps more than once a day. I find this time of year, I'm spending a disproportionate amount of time looking at, is it going to rain in the UK, but across Europe and around the world. So I find I have a part-time job as a weather person for 3 or 4 months here, which is so critically important, and you can't control it. And I guess you take what comes, but you do a lot of work to prepare for that. And we've had a lot of discussion leading up to hitting the record button around regenerative ag and sustainability, and you had mentioned as part of that, it's easy to see that it's the right thing to do long term, but it's not as simple as that, just to say you just run and start doing things. So you're in some programs related to that. Maybe you could explain a little bit about where you are in your journey for regen agriculture.
Yeah, so but before I say that, you'll know that as farmers we can control most things, but we can't control the weather. So the weather is probably the weather and variables in this. God does the watering, and he doesn't always turn up when you need him to. But so the regen, it's a topic which I've started to focus on. I think as have a lot of farmers. So I've joined the Regen Accelerator program, which is a sort of speakers, and we also have farm visits. Some of the speakers are international, although there's quite a lot of expertise emerging in the UK. So people that are either consulting on these topics of soil improvement and soil health, or how you build integrated systems and you remove reliance on what I would call generically the can and the bag. I start to fix some of the soil biology and other things. So far, my journey has been interesting and fascinating, and I can see lots of ways of improving things environmentally. There potentially does. There will be a yield output cost to a lot of those things. So there is a dilemma that the world will sort of be facing, which is how you balance sustainable output that's needed to feed global requirements against how you can manage the environment and improve the environment better so that the human impact on the world is more measured.
Yeah. And it probably tempers the pace of change because you can't, if you go too fast, then your yield loss is more pronounced, and that's not the right answer either. So it's kind of slow and steady, I guess would be.
Slow and steady. Well, if we get it wrong, it's dangerous because it obviously compromises the business, and that can compromise people's livelihoods, and financial success is as equally important as getting the environment right. And if we're top down from environment, but we cease to function as a business, then that isn't going to meet any feed demands globally.
Yeah, there's a challenge there. In that group that you described, I guess because people are in the group, I guess you have one common agreement. You're all friendly to the idea. Is it fair to say as well that not everyone's in the same place in terms of where they are on the journey? So how do you, I guess, is that true, first of all? And I guess maybe the bigger challenge is how do you bring everyone together starting from different starting points to get to
Yes.
whatever that looks like in the future?
I would agree. That is the case. I would sort of call it multicultural, but not in a sense that we're from different countries or background, but we may all be seeking different answers, and we may be at different parts in our career, different ages, including new entrants and people like me that are heading off towards retirement. But the common thing is that we're all there to learn, and then interpretation and take-home messages are individually treated and responded to. So some people are well on with regen conversion, and there is no one thing that fixes this. I mean, there was a bit of a myth that if we all went no-till drilling, that was regen. Well, that's a tiny part of regen. And I think a lot of people, that pigeons come home to roost because they found that actually they'd stopped tilling, but their yields went down, and there were a lot of other things that they should have been doing to support the biological change on that journey. And also that it probably takes 4 or 5 years really in transition before the visual improvements are seen and measured, which
So-
is quite a long time.
Yeah, but if we came back in 4 or 5 years and we took the same shovel out that we did today,
Yeah.
dug the same holes that we dug today, your point is you would see a demonstrable change over that period of time.
Yeah, I mean, you can build more resilience, more moisture retention. You can remove some of your reliance off of inorganic fertilizers and things. It's a movable feast, and it's the main drive.
And back to the earlier point, you've got a group of people, all multicultural, as you mentioned. That would not be any different from any other part of the world, as I would see. I think it's kind of the same story everywhere. Everyone's trying to find their way in this. It can be very complex, and I'm not sure how we keep everybody going in the same direction. But I guess the good thing is people are moving in that direction. I do see a lot of complexity. I don't know what your thoughts are about how we keep it. How do you keep it as simple as possible, even though it is quite complex?
Yeah, I mean, fiscal drivers obviously out there. What do I mean by that? Better government incentives, and that will be different throughout the world, throughout Europe or the UK. The thing with government policies is that they change rapidly, and they have a history of sort of getting things wrong. But there are policies to support stewardship and sustainability, and certainly there's a lot of more appetite for going that way within our government, and there has been in the last 5 years. I think they need to be mindful about how they don't compromise the industry and turn off our ability to feed ourselves, and we live on an island. And I think that it's great that people are gaining more knowledge, and there's a big knowledge share pool globally. We've had really good sessions with international speakers that have been doing a lot of regen, but continuous arable in regen is a big challenge because you need quite a lot of interaction to bring back the biology in the soil, and therefore you might be looking more at ruminant arable feed stocks rather than saleable arable commodities. And if you want to take a combinable crop every year, then that is more challenging. But there are some regen farmers that have done a lot of work in continuous arable, even in the absence of livestock, which is that's an even bigger challenge.
Yeah, you have some livestock already, but that would change what you do year to year already, and now there's another big step depending how you take it.
And it also relies on those animals within the enterprise silos. So whether it's sheep or cattle or dairy, those enterprise silos need to perform ideally successfully in their own silo. And then the cross-fertilization literally is from the animal feces, which then becomes a soil biological improvement and a nutrient offering. If those enterprises or the stacking of those enterprises cease to function, for instance, if sheep or beef or dairy is unprofitable, then that's a threat to the systems that we're currently being encouraged to adopt. Also get the discussion about the impact of ruminant gas in the environment, which is a whole nother discussion. I mean, we as farmers we receive many mixed messages, and it's a case of navigating what works and not being too fast and not too risky.
Well, I think that's a good way to maybe we could wrap it up to say we saw some barley today, starting from a good place under current practices and all the things you're doing. There's a bit of a direction being set. It's not easy in the sense that it could be complex. It is complex, and all those things that need to be considered. But it's really good that we're starting from a good place. It just means how we do it, and if we do it the right way, we'll stay on the right path and actually come up with all the benefits, the soil health and all these things that come with it. So I guess we'll have to come back and do another episode of this so we can track the progress. I think what our plan is to do is we're going to go a little bit further up the chain. I think our next stop was we're going to take the farmer into the brewery and have a discussion on that. That'll be for another video that's upcoming. But I think what we want to do is kind of take it full supply chain. So now we'll take Nick the farmer and we'll put him in a brewing setting and talk to a brewer, and we'll just promise you to stay tuned for that. For now, I guess, Nick, thanks for taking some time again. Thanks for welcoming us back and for sharing some of those insights. So very much appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
I think, Brent, it's interesting. There's been a long theme coming through around storytelling, which I know you like to talk about a lot, and sustainability. But I think there's a new theme emerging. For me, certainly, it's just the role of contracting. And we heard that with the US farmers discussion around long-term contracts. And now we heard about the buyback contracts that Nick is saying is key for them to try new varieties. So certainly those procurement guys have quite an important role to play as we see some of these things, move in whatever direction you like.
Yeah, well, as we've talked about a lot, I think it's really important to bring that farmer story to life, and Nick and others are great to tell it the way it is from their perspective. So it's important, and exactly as you say, Danielle, these important things are starting to bubble to the surface. So if you want people to do regen ag practices in the long term, I'm not sure that an annual contract is the right way to deliver that message, right? That you might be here this year, but are you not going to be there next year or the year after? So I think there's a need that contracting piece will be increasingly more important to get. You can kind of tell from the discussion I had with Nick, and it's the same with others, that they're ready to do a lot of things, but you got to have some commitment from both sides. So I think that was really important, and a lot of work being done in all the regen ag piece, and he's part of a group, as he mentioned. So it's good to see that they're motivated and they're activated. So I think we're kind of...
I don't know if it's just me, Brad, but I would certainly love a follow-up conversation just to understand a little bit around his throwaway comments about how much more difficult it is to do sustainability in a combinable crop. That's, if you don't have livestock around. I certainly had never made that connection before.
Yeah. And we did it in the UK. We did it last year in Sweden as well. And I hadn't thought of it, but one of the best tools you can have these days is you need a shovel, and you get out into the barley field and you dig into the
Exactly.
soil,
Yeah.
and you can see it. And what he was talking about, and others echo the same thing. You can actually see physically, you can see the changes that's going on. So, and I didn't prompt him. Nick used the word resiliency. So he can already see the benefits on his farm, and he's already talking about, even his comment was, it was so wet they had to wait so they could seed the crop. And then I think he used the phrase, and then the tap turned off, which is, when I hear that, I think that's a great way, in his words, to say we see climate variability and it's getting more extreme. So too wet to plant, and then all of a sudden you plant and then there's no water. So that's where the resiliency will come in and be very important. So that's where, in the farmer's voice, we can get those stories shared and raise awareness with people. I think that's critically important.
And then Brent, where did you head afterwards? You went to the brewery to see the full story come full circle.
So yeah, so I guess coming up next, we're gonna have a little more from a UK influence, but we're gonna then turn over and see the end of the supply chain. So we're gonna have a brewery visit. So stay tuned for that. And we also have another very interesting farm visit, which will give a similar but different perspective at a farmer level. So I guess the next two podcasts have a little more of a UK flavor.
See you next week.
Pursuing the perfect pint. Yep. Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, as we promised, we've now moved from the farm setting with Nick to in the pub. So I guess we're at Hook Norton Brewery. If you get a chance, visit it. Highly recommend it. But I guess you've now seen and heard a little bit about the Maris Otter story. You shared earlier you'd actually thought about, a little integration into malting and the whole sustainability story. You heard about carbon reduction and so on. So what comes to your mind when you think about what you saw this afternoon in our little tour?
Local network and shortening the supply chain has always got merit. It's with the heritage varieties, it's about lower output and higher price, and the price has to be also shared with the grower, otherwise it doesn't stack up. But and it would be great to get the malt made in Gloucestershire or Oxfordshire, in the Cotswold region, where
I think,
we're 17 miles from this wonderful historic brewery.
Yeah, and that whole story is wonderful. You don't see too many of these. I guess all the brands at Hook Norton are produced with Maris Otter, so, and they have a following that comes with that. So if we could tie that around and add the farmer story to it, I think we'd have something that would be quite interesting.
And the local growers that are producing otter, and that'll be going way out of district and coming back. It's still locally produced. It's just that the malted bit is the missing link. That's not a deal breaker. It's just an observation.
What we saw was really interesting in the brewery, where we saw a picture of a combine. So you actually saw, for visitors to come through this brewery, they would actually have a connection back to what you do every day. So they actually see barley field, a combine, and they start to draw the connection. I would hope that they start to put that all together.
Yeah, in terms of public engagement, it would be a great story to put up there, and at a visitor centre like this is a perfect place to do it.
Yeah. And we can do more of it. So I guess come to Hook Norton. Maybe Nick will be here, or maybe there'll be a picture of him on his combine harvesting and so on. But anyway, stay tuned as we continue the pursuit of the perfect pint.
And we can recommend a beer.
And we know there's some good beer at Hook Norton, so try it. Cheers.